To other news now, Australia is installing renewable power at more than 4 times the rate of any other country, according to new data from the Australian National University in Canberra. Researchers say the findings suggest Australia will meet its Paris Agreement commitments 5 years early. Lead researcher Professor Andrew Blakers joins me now from Canberra. Professor, thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning.
So we're adopting renewables at 4 times the rate of any other country, but what does that actually mean? What are we adopting and how many of these are we adopting?
We're installing about 6 or 6.5 gigawatts of new renewable electricity systems each year. That's wind farms, solar farms and rooftop solar. And this is about 4 or 5 times faster than Japan, United States, China or the European Union. It's also fast enough, if continued, to meet the Paris targets many years early. And it also is fast enough to get to 50% renewable electricity in 2024.
So why do you think Australia has become the renewable world champion?
The reason is that we've got great wind, great sun, very experienced rooftop solar industry, very experienced wind and solar farm industry, and relatively high electricity prices. All of this comes together to make Australia a very attractive country. The other lead, China, at more northerly latitudes, the sun is not as good. They have cold winters where they need a lot of seasonal storage. Australia is not like that. Australia is more like, it sits in the sun belt, plus or minus 35 degrees of latitude, where all the developing countries also sit. And Australia is a great pathfinder for the developing countries to go straight to renewables and skip the fossil fuel era altogether.
Professor Blakers, it's all well and good to have these adoption rates in renewables and to be able to store and then indeed harvest this energy, but do we have the grids, do we have the infrastructure to support it?
If we did nothing, the answer would be no. However, it's quite straightforward to install more pumped hydro, more batteries, more transmission and implement better demand management. All of this is off-the-shelf policies and procedures and technologies and already very widespread in Australia. So it's simply a matter of ensuring that the transmission and storage keeps pace with the build of the wind and solar. For example, Snowy 2.0, if it was given the go-ahead by the government, would be almost enough by itself to support a 50% renewable electricity grid in 2024, which is where we're heading if we keep doing what we're doing right now.
So does the responsibility lie solely with the government in getting us to a 100% renewable electricity grid?
The government has had very little to do, in fact, with the boom in renewables. The renewable energy target was met quite some months ago. So the pipeline that's now coming through of wind and solar farms is because it simply makes economic sense. So provided that government policy is neutral or even better, positive, I think we'll do quite well. And in fact, state governments have a lot to do with it as well because they are the people who would authorise private construction of new storage, battery or pumped hydro and new interstate transmission. So it's governments working together merely to facilitate the private sector investment in wind and solar.
Do you expect the trend in this uptake of renewables to continue?
I do. Of course, a hostile collection of governments could turn it off. On the other hand, the economics gets ever more compelling. Wind and solar are now cheaper than new build gas and coal and are also approaching or approximately at the same price now as some black coal power stations. So merely the existing operating costs of black coal power stations is coming under pressure. As more and more solar and wind comes into the system, I think there's going to be a series of premature retirements of black coal power stations to make room for the zero running cost wind and solar.
You mentioned that a hostile collection of governments could stand in the way for this trend to continue. It is an election year. What does both sides spell to you? Are either major parties considered hostile?
Well, I don't want to get into that, but what I just observe is what's not to like about this. The net cost of meeting our Paris targets 5 years early is zero because the cost of the renewables is comparable or cheaper than the fossil fuels that it's replacing. Furthermore, it's going to involve tens of billions of dollars of investment in rural and regional areas for the wind generators, the solar farms and the high voltage transmission and the pumped hydro storage. So it's just great for country areas.
Okay, lead researcher on all of this, Professor Andrew Blakers. Many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.